final TED Talk is from our very own Miss Riley. Laura Sanders Riley was born and raised in Batesburg, Leesville, South Carolina, but calls Columbia her home. She began her teaching career in 1997 and has taught at Hammond School for the past 16 years. She spent 10 years in 6th grade geography, then was socially promoted, allowed to skip a grade, and taught 8th grade government for 4 years. She has spent the past 2 years teaching senior AP US Government and Politics and various other upper school history and policy classes. Laura has been the chair of the history department at Hammond School since 2012. She sponsors the Youth and Government Delegation, which annually participates in the Youth and Government Conference, a model legislature that writes, debates, and passes mock legislation. In her copious amounts of spare time, she is a wife of 1, mother of 2, dog owner of 4, and devoted political junkie. Her TEDx talk is entitled, How to Have a Political Discussion Without Being Punched in the Face. Please welcome Ms. Laura Riley.
Hello. Ooh. It's different. Okay, so we've heard some great talks today. We've had some really powerful discussions. We've talked about hunger here in the United States. We've talked about issues abroad and how to deal with our own emotions coming home from those things. We've talked about the death penalty and mental illness and concussions. And so what I'm going to speak to you today about is where do you go from here? How do you have an engaging political conversation without being punched in the face? A better term is probably the idea of having civil discourse. Now, I have some experience with this. My first political conversation took place at age 8 with my father. Okay? Now, those of you who have taken classes with me know that I talk about my dad a lot, and that is because my dad and I are very different. So, I come home from school at age 8 in 3rd grade, and I had just heard the best joke in the world. And I wanted to tell it to my dad. And so I wait very patiently for the right time. We sit down at the dinner table, we say blessing, and then all of a sudden I look at my dad and say, okay, Dad, I have a joke for you. And he says, what is it? And I said, what does McDonald's and the federal government have in common? And he says, what? And I said, they're both run by clowns named Ronald. Well, my father puts his fork down, puts his hands on the table, and looks at me and says, young lady, we do not speak ill of Ronald Wilson Reagan in this house. And I realized my father and I had some very different ideas when it came to how to talk about politics, how to engage in meaningful conversations. And these conversations took a very long time to develop. And some of our conversations were beneficial, and some of our conversations were detrimental. Several years he tried to change me, and he sent me a book one year by Glenn Beck because he thought the experts could do it, and he gave me a gift subscription to Rush Limbaugh's magazine because he really wanted an expert to help me out. But nothing worked because you see, this is where I live, right? This is South Carolina. This is me, okay? I have always been a little bit of a fish out of water, okay? Well, let's fast forward a few years, and here I stand before you, a veteran teacher, in an independent school in Columbia, South Carolina, which is presumably the buckle of the Bible Belt, teaching religion, economics, and politics. The 3 things people fight about all the time. And so I have honed the following craft. How to have a political conversation without being punched in the face. And that's where we go today. Where do you take the information that you've got and pass it on and have conversations with each other to where people will actually listen and not shut down? Now, show of hands, how many of you follow the political campaign that's going on right now? Right? Good. How many of you have been absolutely disgusted by the amount of vitriol and just yuck that's been spewed all over the place? Right? It seems new, doesn't it? It's not. Ladies and gentlemen, and please note your attention here. As American citizens, our institutional memory lasts a lifetime. It's really easy for us to forget that our country has been going on for a really long time. And by the way, there are more countries in the world than the United States. I just want to point that out very, very quickly. But if you notice, this is a picture from 1804, which actually happened because of an election in 1800. The Vice President of the United States, Aaron Burr, shot and killed the former Secretary of Treasury of the United States, Alexander Hamilton, in a duel. Now, Alexander Hamilton has had a recent sort of revival of popularity thanks to a very successful Broadway show. He is, however, nonetheless dead at the end of a bullet from a political opponent. What I'm trying to tell you is that maybe the mess that we're hearing today isn't as bad as it was. Okay? Preston Brooks and Charles Sumner, May of 1856. Preston Brooks is one of our very own congressmen from the great state of South Carolina. Charles Sumner was a Yankee from Massachusetts who dared speak in the Senate that perhaps the violence that was going on in Kansas, what was often referred to as bleeding Kansas, may have potentially been because of slavery. Now, Preston Brooks took a bit of an issue with that, and he took his cane, went to the Senate floor where Charles Sumner was giving a speech, and literally almost beat him half to death on the floor of the Senate. Now, one would think that his constituents back home in South Carolina would have not reelected him. They did, many, many times over, and actually mailed him canes that were carved with "hit him again." So some things have changed and other things haven't, my friends, but know that politics has always been a dirty business. You see the news. We are so polarized. We are in different places. We think different thoughts. But we're not here. We're not divided. There are not 750,000 young men dying on the battlefields today. Our nation has been forged and held together in blood. It is not going anywhere. What we need to do is learn how to discuss it, how to discuss politics, how to discuss our differences, how to learn from one another in an engaging manner that we can all learn to love who we are and what we believe in. And so, today I want to give you 6 things to take home with you. 6 recognitions that you need to have when you are engaging in a political discussion, whether it's with your crazy Uncle Bill at the dinner table, whether it's with your crazy left-wing Aunt Edna at Christmas. Who knows who you're having the conversation with? You need to look inside yourself and come to 6 recognitions. One must recognize bias exists, and it is a given. Your life is colored by your experiences. You are who you are because of the context of where you are and how you live. A person who is born, grows up, and lives in an impoverished cycle in the rural parts of South Carolina is going to have a very, very different reaction to events than someone who is born, grows up, and lives in an upper middle class white neighborhood in an urban area. We see things differently. We react to things differently, which colors our bias. We have to learn that the people that we are arguing with oftentimes don't know any different because that is not their experience. And even the most unbiased ones of us have our own biases. I have to tell tell myself all the time, I consider myself to be a very open-minded person, and the one thing that bothers me more than anything else is when people are closed-minded. But when I am bothered, I am biased against those who are closed-minded, and that is my bias. I have to take a step back and say, listen, this person is firm on who they are. This person firmly believes what they have been taught, and therefore, good for them. So we have to take a step back and recognize the fact that every one of us comes to a situation and to a conversation with a specific context and specific experience that forms our bias. Number 2, facts and data are in the eyes of the beholder. We live in a world where information is available to us at any point. And that information can be used in so many ways. Ms. Banks spoke earlier about how she took human lives and made a spreadsheet out of it. And that happens every day. And it's used in so many ways to prove different points. I can tell you that I think President Obama has been a fabulous president because currently the unemployment rate is just below 5%. I can also tell you that I think President Obama has been a terrible president because our national debt is above $18 trillion. Numbers don't lie, but we use numbers to prove our point every day. And how we use it is determined on where we get those numbers from. Rule number 1, in a political discussion, know thy source. Know thy source. In D.C., there are a lot of places that end with words like foundation or institute. Now, are those places completely unbiased, or do they have their own agenda? The answer is, most of the time they have their own agenda. They are clearinghouses and lobbying groups for information that specifically are leaning left, right, conservative, liberal, libertarian, you name it. And so you need to really know from whence your information comes. Because if not, you're never going to be able to justify the argument or the conversation that you are having. Let's call it a conversation, shall we? The next one. There are 2 sides to every issue, and both are right. Okay. Liddy is sitting at dinner with her Uncle Bill. Her Uncle Bill thinks Liddy is completely crazy because she is a communist liberal. But Uncle Bill is crazy in Liddy's mind because he's Uncle Bill, right? He's so far right, you can't have a conversation with him. You see, in life, you hear that there are 3 sides to every story. Your side, my side, and the truth. Okay? In politics, there are 2 sides to every story. My side, your side, and both of them are true, dadgummit, because I'm right. Everybody believes that they are right. And so, when you understand that the person who you're having a conversation with is just as passionate as you are, and believes just as much that they are correct as you do, then you can look at each other and then begin discussing issues from a meaningful standpoint, because you're both right. There's nothing that's black and white when it comes to politics. I can't tell you the number of times I've watched a movie and there's that moment in the movie where the bad person is having a conversation with the good person, and in one 30-second monologue, the good person completely changes the bad person's mind, and they have seen the light, and everything is good and right with the universe. Guess what, people? It doesn't happen. You can engage in conversation with people, but it doesn't take one time to do it. Learning how to change a mind takes a long time, and usually you can't do it. Because people, again, are colored by their own experiences. And it's a life experience that typically teaches someone a different lesson. And people only want to learn lessons when they are at the table and they're having conversations and they feel a part of the discussion and not singled out. Social media is another problem. I cannot tell you the number of times that I have seen Barack Obama wearing a turban. Nor can I tell you the number of times I have seen he and Hillary Clinton portrayed as parasites. Nor can I tell you the number of times that I have seen Donald Trump as Lord Voldemort, whose name shall not be spoken. It doesn't really matter. No matter how many times you see this, when people post information on social media, it does one or two things. It's either to get as many likes as you can possibly get, or to tick people off. And that's what happens. You're either going to get people who already agree with you to agree with you, or people who don't agree with you at all to dislike you even more. So just keep in mind that. Keep that in mind the next time you go to hit a send. There are those looking for a fight. Close your eyes, picture them, you know who they are, they're in your classes. Okay? Now, I'm going to tell you something very important. Okay? They're in your classes, they're in your lives. I'm going to tell you something very important that will help you in life. This is one of Ms. Riley's little life lessons. There is one way that you will walk away from an argument and not have lost. And that one way is to not get into an argument to begin with. A discussion is very different from an argument. When you are angry, when your hackles are up, when your voice is raised, you are incapable of listening, and so is everyone else around you. And there are those people who like to engage to get your hackles up. Turn around, walk away, have a conversation at a time when cooler heads are there, and I guarantee you they will be more open to listening. And sometimes it has to be Chinese water torture, where you keep talking to them over and over and over again, but eventually people listen. And finally, I go back to my father. Some of you know this, some of you don't. It's very interesting to just watch the study on sleep. My father, a few years ago, was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. He never was much of a sleeper, which that's what actually triggered my thoughts earlier. I have been cleaning out his home because he's living in a different place now. And as I've been cleaning his home, I found two shrines. I call them shrines because they're groups of pictures that are posed almost like a shrine that you can look at. One of them is a shrine to the Republican Party, okay? He has, seriously, I'm not lying. There's a picture of Ronald Reagan and it's signed, and there's a picture of George W. Bush and it's signed, and there's a picture of George H.W. Bush and it's signed, and all of that. And you know, I'm surprised there's not little incense and petals sprinkled around everywhere in front of it. But just next to it, there are pictures of me. His daughter has always been very different, right? Now, I'm an only child, so he doesn't get to pick favorites, you know, that's off the table. But still, I realize that no matter how different my dad and I are, he loves me. In his way, he loved me. And so what you have to understand, my friends, is that most people, there are bad people in the world, but most people genuinely have good intentions. It's the road, it's the means, it's the path by which those intentions are met that differs. And that's where the conversation happens. And that's where the speaking begins. Thank you.